trash company in Ciudad Juarez came across a body as they made their rounds on Marisela Street downtown.
21-year-old Canadian woman reported missing in El Paso, found dead in Juarez.
Marching with signs calling out the Mexican government. State police say her body was found last Tuesday, and investigators say she had been beaten in the head with a rock. The mother of a woman missing in Juarez joining in on a protest with other family members who have lost loved ones in Mexico.
Is also investigating the murder of a woman found killed inside an abandoned home and a body found wrapped in a blanket. This happened in North Juarez at the Colonia La Playa. Another woman was found dismembered. Police say different parts of her body were placed in a clear plastic bag and left across East Juarez.
Protesters held up signs that read in Spanish, "Not another one." Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today I'm joined by Holland, Nova, and then that is Pix right there. They will be in the background of today's video. Before we go any further, yes, I dyed my hair for the first time ever in my life. I am now a redhead brown hair girly, and my eyebrows are blonde, so that's lovely. There might be a video coming out on it. I don't know if I have enough footage, but you'll see. And before we go any further, yes, there are timestamps. I know I talk a lot in the intros, but I timestamp everything if you want to just skip ahead, or if you know what this series is, skip ahead, please. Today's case is something I think we all need to know about. It's something that I didn't even know about until like 2-3 years ago, and that is femicides and the missing woman of Juarez and Mexico, to be blunt. Today, we're not focusing on just one person or one case. We're focusing on a variety of them. I will be talking about a couple cases. I think I have 4 or 5 lined up, but it's going to be a lot of statistics in here, and I know it's going to get a little boring at the beginning, but please stick around because this is something I think we all need to know about. It's not really just a true crime case. This is an epidemic and pretty dangerous. So yeah, statistics is the only math I'm good at, so let's go. So if you don't know what Hometown Horrors is a series on my channel. I grew up on true crime and have always been fascinated by why people do what they do, the whole nature versus nurture aspect of it. Hometown Horrors, where I take true crime cases that have some sort of significance in my hometown, county, and surrounding areas. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, sister city to Ciudad, Juarez, Mexico. There's this insane phenomenon where Ciudad Juarez, Mexico is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, often ranked on the top 10 on the yearly analysis list. I think they're currently on top 3 most dangerous. And until 3 years ago, El Paso, Texas was always ranked one of the safest cities in America, often top 10. I know we have made our way back onto that list, but we're not where we used to be. That was before an outsider with extreme hate for Hispanics massacred 23 people. So no matter how safe a city may be, there are always crimes being committed. As someone who grew up in this city, who knows the ins and outs, I have this knowledge which I believe can bring a certain unique perspective to these cases. As I said, El Paso was one of the safest cities for years. There are only so many criminal cases I'd be able to cover before I ran out just based in El Paso. Thus, I will be expanding my reach to surrounding areas including Juarez, Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico, Horizon, Texas, Chaparral, New Mexico, and other surrounding areas that I have been to personally and am very familiar with, that I will be able to give an inside knowledge to. Before we begin, I want to give my trigger warnings, and these are a lot. This is, like I said, a case I think you should watch. If any of these might affect you, click out now, please. I will see you at another time. So my warnings are for gun violence, murder, dismembering, physical violence, rape, gender-based violence, mutilation, torture, publicly displayed deceased bodies, homophobia, and pretty much every violence warning I can give. It's a tough case, it's a tough topic, and seriously, if you can't handle any of the above, please click out now. If any of these topics you believe you would be able to handle, please stop watching. Put yourself first, and I'll see you at a later date with a different video. This one is really hard. If I get any information wrong, please kindly let me know down below. I tried my best to get the following information accurately as possible. However, I used multiple different sources, and if only one mentioned a certain detail that I was unable to verify, I went with the more commonly reported detail or just left it out all in general. Sources will all be linked down below, and I only used respected websites. So I want to talk about 2 of my sources for this. The first source is the Forgotten Woman of Juarez podcast by iHeartRadio. It's actually the one that introduced me to femicides in Mexico 2 years ago in the height of the pandemic. I had no idea, and I live next to Juarez. I've lived next to Juarez for 19 years of my life. I've never heard of these before, so that's how crazy it is. I also watched the documentary on Netflix called The 3 deaths of Marisela Escobedo, and that one is in Spanish with English subtitles. I think it's something you need to watch if you want to learn more. I do cover her case later on, but it's barely scratching the surface, just like a summary. So if I'm looking off to the side of the camera at all, it's because I have my iPad here where I have my script loaded. If I didn't have a script, then I would forget so many of these details and go off topic constantly. I do apologize if this is inconvenient. Lastly, this video is an informational research study that I am sharing for academic entertainment reasons only. I mean no harm to anyone mentioned. So grab your blanket and a snack and let's begin. Like I said earlier, there's not a lot of information on individual cases, but it's more of an epidemic. This is a widespread problem in Mexico. So first we're going to start with our statistics. It's actually really hard to find individual cases that are not more than a couple paragraphs, which is really sad. So before we get into the story, I feel like I should give a background on what is a femicide. As like I said, we're not focusing on a particular case or person, but rather an assortment of them that make up a huge problem in Mexico. Femicide is defined as the criminal deprivation of the life of a female victim for reasons based on gender, and this can include transgender people too. Anyone who identifies as a female could become a femicide victim. The murder of a woman or girl is classified as femicide based on when at least one of the 7 criteria is met. These 7 criteria are evidence of sexual violence prior to the victim's death, a sentimental, affective, or trusting relationship with the perpetrator, and the victim's body being displayed in public. In 2012, the Mexican Penal Code first included femicide, incorporating it into official crime statistics as a distinct category in the same year. To put that in perspective, I always say that El Paso's yearly homicide murder rate is no more than 60 a year. It's usually a lot less than that. And Juarez on average has 1450 deaths on homicide alone. That's not calculating the distinct murders. That's all of them. That's 24 times as much as El Paso, with only a couple miles and a thin metal fence separating the 2 cities and countries. Femicide was a relatively new crime to report and record, so identifying femicides has not been uniformly classified as such by different law enforcement institutions since the category was introduced. Due to this, it is difficult to calculate how many femicides have actually happened in Mexico over time, because different bureaus calculate these homicides using all different criteria. One thing is unanimous though. Femicides that are recorded go up every year and increase hand in hand with family violence and sexual assault cases in Mexico in the past 8 years. In the 1990s, in the height of gang violence, Mexico became the international reference point for gender-based violence following the murder of more than 350 women and girls in Ciudad, Juarez. In 2007, an alert mechanism for gender violence against women, or the AVGM, was created. The AVGM allows citizens to request the declaration of a gender alert, kind of like an Amber Alert in America, or I don't know if they have them all over the world, in municipalities where violence against women is increasingly and obligates local authorities to examine the situation and implement measures to end gender-based violence. As of October 2021, 25 AVGMs have been declared in 22 of Mexico's 32 states, so 2/3 of it. In early 2020, several high-profile femicides, one of which was the killing of a minor, sparked a large demonstration against gender-based violence across Mexico. At least 359 demonstrations like this took place in 2020 and 239 in 2021, with protests peaking around March each year. In 2019, 2020, and 2021, annual marches have been held to mark International Women's Day on March 8th. I don't know if there was one this year in 2022 because this article that I got this data from was published in 2021. In addition, tens of thousands of women have participated in nationwide strikes to protest the epidemic of violence against women in Mexico. The growing prevalence of gender-based violence in Mexico has been accompanied by deterioration perceptions of security. According to Gallup World Poll, women in Mexico are more likely to say that they do not feel safe walking alone at night, while the perceptions of security for both men and women have deteriorated since 2007. In 2007, 46% of women reported feeling unsafe walking alone compared to 37% of men. By 2019, this gap had widened significantly, with 67% of women feeling unsafe compared to 48% of men. This growing disparity between male and female perceptions of safety follows a deterioration in the rates of femicide, family violence, and sexual assault since 2015. Although guns are the primary cause of homicide in both males and females in Mexico, in the past 7 years, the cause of death in femicide femicides are usually due to strangulation, drowning, or suffocation. Knives are used in 23% of femicides and firearms in 21% of femicides. Mexico is known for organized crime, but there is a very low statistical relationship between femicide and organized crime and femicide and gun violence. Homicide is a huge issue in Mexico. Both men and women die from it, but it is more likely that men are killed due to gang violence and cartels while women die by domestic violence. Again, to reiterate, I am not saying men don't die by homicide, because they do. They just don't die at the rate women do by femicide, or homicide but female femicide. Also, it does not mean women don't die by cartel violence, but rather due to a broadly gendered murder trend. In plain words, because they are women, they are killed. When it comes to alleged homicide victims, in the three categories, femicide victims tend to be minors, underage, at 11.6% of all homicide victims, compared to the all-male homicides under 18 percentage of 3.6. In recent years, the upsurge of killings of minors as well as young adults has become so significant that homicide has become the leading cause of death of Mexico males and females aged 15 to 35. Current data on femicide reveals a distinct type of violence that is not entirely explained by the overall increase in organized crime, activity, or gun violence in recent years. Overall murders fell by 3.6% in 2021 compared by the previous year, while femicides increased by 2.7% according to government data. On any given day, 10 women die by femicide each day in Mexico. Now that we know all the statistics, let's go into what could be the root of the problem. A study from UCLA Chicano Studies provided the following information. In the 10 years from 1993 to 2003, over 320 women have been kidnapped and murdered in Ciudad, Juarez, Mexico. These bodies were found strangled, mutilated, dismembered, raped, stabbed, and tortured. Some of them have been so badly beaten, disfigured, or decomposed that the remains are unable to be identified by the victim's family, even if they're identified to the victim's family. 93 of those crimes have been defined by Mexico's definition of rape, which is penis penetration. In those 10 years, some of the suspects were jailed, but femicides continued without being stopped, to the point that copycat killings began in other border cities, including Nogales, Matamoros, Mexicali, and Nuevo Laredo, and also in Chihuahua City. Most of the victims were young poor victims who came from small villages, but even the worst part of it is that colorism played a big part in the murders. The girls were physically short, slim, dark-haired, and dark-skinned. The darker their skin was, the higher the rate they died by femicide. With the average age of 15 to 18, there were also outliers of girls as young as 6 years old and women in their 60s to 70s being killed. Of these victims that they were able to identify, over half of these were employed at a macadora or were seeking job at a macadora. A macadora is a factory in Mexico run by foreign companies and exporting its products to the country for that company. So I don't know, like if say Coke was made in Mexico, which some are, and then just exported to the States to be sold, because I think the headquarters of Coke is in the States. That's what they're making there. And it could be anything. We'll talk about some of the victims and what they were working at. From these, 1/6 were students. According to the Mexican census of 1990, Juarez was an economically viable population. 50% worked at macadoras, most of which were female. Not all of these profile victims were Mexican citizens though. At least 6 were US citizens with Mexican heritage from El Paso and Las Cruces. 1 was from Honduras and another was from the Netherlands. The question that arose from the study include, why are these women being killed in such a brutal, dehumanizing, misogynistic fashion? What is so threatening about their presence on the border? Who is benefiting from their deaths? And what accounts for the silence that has surrounded the crimes and protected the perpetrators on both sides of the border? A few grassroots organizations in Juarez have tried to raise awareness about femicide, but government silence in both Mexico and the United States has created an air of hearsay and urban myths about these femicides. A couple of theories about who is committing the femicides vary from serial killers to satanic cults, an Egyptian chemist mastermind who was arrested in 1995, Los Rebeldes, a local gang arrested in 1996, Los Chafaras, a band of bus drivers arrested in 1999, corrupt Mexican police, which a lot of the Mexican police are corrupt, well-protected sons of rich families, or even drug cartels. There are also theories on why the women are being murdered. These include snuff films, organ harvesting, white slavery, the victims living double lives as prostitutes, the victims dressing like maquelocas, which means like factory sluts, in English, in short dresses and high heels that provoked their attackers, and unemployed men are resentful of women getting jobs at the maquiladoras. There is no way to prove who the exact killers are, nor to prove who these people are killing the women, or if any of the above reasons is why. So before we get into some of the cases, I want to say that I have been to Juarez once. It's actually really easy to go to Juarez I didn't have a passport at the time, I do now. This was back in February of 2022, or April, and it's really easy to cross the border to Mexico. We weren't stopped or anything, we just went right through. And then to come back, it takes hours. I was only there for 6 hours. My mom went because she wanted a Starbucks cup, that's only sold in Mexico. We're only there for 6 hours. We went to one Starbucks, we got the cup, we came back, and you could just feel the air of unsafety. I did not feel safe at all. I have a lot of footage that I might include in this video from there, but I just didn't feel safe. And then once I was back on American soil, I finally felt safe again. And that's hard because women live there. Back on January 15th, 2022, an El Paso lesbian couple, 28-year-olds Noemi Medina and Tania Jelusa Martinez, were in Juarez when they were violently murdered. Their bodies dismembered with parts placed into plastic bags scattered along the Juarez Porvenir highway. The couple were married in July of 2021 while raising Noemi's 3 children. Although the pair lived in El Paso, Noemi was from Juarez and Tiana was from El Cerros, Chihuahua, a community along the highway where their body parts were found. Now, it's believed that these murders, femicides, were hate crimes against the 2 LGBTQ+ women on top of being femicides. It was also believed that the people who committed these crimes would not be found nor held responsible, being as 92% of violent crimes in Mexico go unsolved. In Juarez, every 45 hours, a woman dies by femicide. On January 24th, Chihuahua State Police identified a woman named Jacqueline Estela CR, who lured Noemi Medina and Tiana Jelusa Martinez to a home in a rural community of San Adriso, east of Juarez, on January 15, 2022. There, she and a man named David R. murdered and mutilated the 2 women, spreading their remains along the Juarez Porvenir highway hours later. Police claim Jacqueline Isa CR, 25, and David R, 24, are being held on charges of aggravated femicide, the legal team that reflects enhanced penalties for these that target women for violent acts. Thankfully, these women will hopefully get the justice they deserve, but that's not the case for every femicide victim. In fact, most will go unsolved, and there will probably be hundreds of thousands femicide victims whose cases will never be reported or their bodies will never be found. Ernestina Enriquez Fierro birthed 5 daughters in Ciudad, Juarez, Mexico, but 3 of those daughters are no longer alive. The first daughter died at birth, the second at 17 years old from a stroke, and the third daughter, Adriana, passed by femicide at just 15 years old. Ernestina, who is a widow, supports her family as a housekeeper who loves her kids with all her heart. Adriana Sarmiento Enriquez was a 15-year-old schoolgirl who had a ton of friends, loved music, dancing, and collecting frog figurines. She knew everyone's birthday and was often in a very happy mood. On Friday, January 18, 2008, Adriana called her mom using her cell phone, saying she was going to get lunch with her friends. Around 5:30, on her way back home, Adriana's friend got off at her bus stop while Adriana kept riding the bus to the next stop to catch another bus that would take her to her neighborhood. But that was the last anyone saw of Adriana. Ernestina and her family searched everywhere for her daughter. Every area downtown, every neighborhood, every bus, but they never found her. Then, on November 29, 2011, Elizabeth, one of Ernestina's daughters, was on her phone with her cousin when she saw a Facebook post from the Forensic Medical Service of Ciudad Juarez, stating that Adriana Sarmiento Enriquez remains are there along with 15 other girls. The government forensics office had found her daughter's remains in November of 2009 in St. Augustine in the Valle de Juarez, an hour from her home, just over a year since Adriana had disappeared. But they didn't call Ernestina. No, she had to find out 2 years later after that, in 2011, from a Facebook post, not the police themselves. Ernestina stated the following: "Before living this nightmare that I think I will never wake up from, I trusted the police. I realized everything was a lie. There are no authorities, there are no justice, there's no respect, there's nothing. Nobody gets punished." Another mother from Juarez, Perla Janina Reyes' daughter, 13-year-old Jocelyn Cadora Reyes, disappeared on December 30th, 2012, on her way to her friend's house. Jocelyn is still missing to this day. Perla protests often and engages in activism to remind the community what is happening to their girls. Reyes claims, "When we go out on the streets, we spread our testimony to stop young girls from dying, right? We have to make young girls aware of this and prevent it. Going out on the streets, screaming out their names, we feel like we're finally doing something to find them, that we are are fighting and that we won't stop until we find them. Disappearances continue in Juarez. We still ask of you that if you see our girls, please help us get them back home. We aren't living in a free country where young people, children can play or go out because there are people who want to destroy them. They destroy their dreams, young people's dreams. Jocelyn was a girl who had big dreams. Norma Laguna Cabral, another mother, says her daughter, Idiana Laguna, 19, never came home one afternoon in 2019. 2 years later, in 2021, authorities found fragments of Adali's skull in Navajo Aroa in the rural Valley de Juarez, a region known for cartel violence, located roughly about an hour east from Juarez. Norma says the following about keeping her daughter's memory alive. When we meet the other mothers, we have been through the same thing. It's like therapy for us. Only we can understand what we're going through. The courage, the disappointment, the helplessness, the despair, the sadness, the pain. That never goes away. Norma Laguna Cabral created a mosaic gravestone for her daughter's memory with the organization Red Misses de Memoras help, saying, I always say that as long as I'm alive, her memory will be alive. I don't want to make it seem like there are no organizations fighting for justice, when in fact there are many people fighting for justice. In fact, I'm going to be able to talk about a few here, but I will have donation links down below. I know I will be making a few contributions. Noema Ledezma Ortega is a lawyer and a founder of the organization Justice para Nuestras Hijas, or in English, Justice for Our Daughters. In 2016, she received her law degree, 14 years after her own 16-year-old daughter, Paloma Angelica Escobar Ledezma, died by femicide in March of 2002. At the time, Noema had only an elementary level education, worked at a maquiladora making parts for airplanes. Noema vowed to get justice for her daughter and other missing women, quoted saying, with this legal weapon, I can fight for all the other victims as well. Noema now works on cases related to kidnapping, femicide, and corruption, while also working with local victims of sex trafficking all the way from the state of Ciudad to southern Mexico to the United States. Recovering them and delivering them to their family is also very rewarding, she says. As a lawyer, I have a certain concept of justice, but as a mother, I believe justice means a lot more. I know I don't have it, and I will never have it. Paloma is remembered by her love for cats, how she dreamed of studying English, working in tourism or as an interpreter, with the hope of one day adopting children. She also worked in the same maquiladora as her mother. On March 2nd, 2002, Paloma attended a computer course and never came back home. Her mother, Noema, searched for her daughter for 27 days. When Noema filed a police report, the authorities minimized her concerns, saying Paloma probably was just having some fun with a boyfriend. Noema believes it was important for the public to hear and share the stories of femicide victims. Noema is quoted saying, doing this might be the only thing that makes the Mexican government feel accountable. Before we get into the last case I'll be talking about today, one that really brought femicides in Juarez to the forefront of American minds, I want to talk about more statistics. This time by New Mexico State University, which is located in Las Cruces, New Mexico, only an hour from El Paso and like an hour and a half from Juarez. Gender and sexuality studies professor Cynthia Bajaro, who has researched the femicides in Juarez, pointed at the who is coming to the murders is not the question to ask, but rather, why is this still going on? Why is it that it's happening in every community in every corner of the world? That should be the issue we're talking about. Unlike the who, the Juarez authorities in the question of who is committing the murders, blaming serial killers, gangs, cartels, and even women themselves, some of whom they claim were living double lives as sex workers, which shouldn't be wrong. The real reason that the femicides happen are more complex and multi-layered, residing in privilege, class, and gender. In Juarez and Mexico in general, impunity gives perpetrators confidence they won't be caught for the crimes they committed, being as we already know that the vast majority of crimes are never punished. Our society is all aware, the victims are aware, that no government was ever interested or willing to solve the issue, says Norma Laguna Ortega, founder of Justice para Nuestras Hijas, or Justice for Our Daughters. The victims don't have any political or economic power that could be of interest to the state. Mothers don't get much help from authorities, leaving them alone to do the work of finding their daughters and fighting for justice. In November 2001, 8 young women were found in El Capo, El Gonado, an abandoned cotton field on a busy street near the Maquiladora Association headquarters. In 2002, 3 mothers presented a petition against the state of Mexico to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The state argued that their daughters' killings were isolated crimes and not part of a systemic pattern. In 2009, the Inter-American Court ruled that Mexico mishandled the Campos Aragoro investigations, failing to protect the victims' human rights. For the first time, a state was held responsible for gender-based killings, setting a historic precedent. Despite the legal victory for the mothers, enriched social and economic systems remain unequal. A culture of machismo, or toxic male dominance, especially in Latin cultures, reinforces stereotypical gender roles. Some have speculated that it fueled resentment towards wage-earning women. Research shows that many perpetrators of femicide are known to their victims, especially in cases of intimate partner violence. Justice is about more than holding a singular perpetrator accountable. Bajado says it's much more complicated and difficult to look at systemically at things, she said. To look societally at the issues and to say, when have I been guilty of misogynistic acts? Now onto the case of Marisela Escobedo. In 2008, Ruby Frey, Marcela's 16-year-old daughter, had gone missing. Marcela owned a wood shop in Juarez, Mexico, when a man in his early 20s had walked in asking for work. Marcela wasn't hiring, but offered the guy to work for the day for her. This man was Sergio Rafael Bezada Baconguera. That very day, he also met 13-year-old Ruby. Sergio was persistent in his pursuit of Ruby. That when Ruby was 15, she was living with Sergio in a separate apartment and soon fell pregnant with his child. The two lived together, but it was obvious to Marisela that her daughter was having a hard time at home. Ruby would make sure to eat all 3 meals at her mother's home every day, often being sent home with 50 to 80 pesos or 2 to 4 American dollars from her mom. 3 days before Ruby went missing, she told Sergio she was leaving him, but then Ruby went missing. Sergio had killed Ruby, burning her body and placing it in a metal trash bin, recruiting his brother Andy and a few acquaintances to ditch the body in a landfill. Her body would not be found until a year later with the aid of Sergio, who had confessed to the killing. During the trial, Sergio was acquitted of the charges, being as he confessed to the crime that had no witnesses, incriminating himself, which is against the law in Mexico. Despite being the killer, having aid in disposing the body, and being the only person who could locate the remains a year later after the femicide was committed, he was let off charges free and fled Chihuahua. Chihuahua is the state that Juarez is in. I guess I should preference that. Marisela was not okay with Sergio's acquittal, marching every day for a year of signs of the crime he committed. Sergio was later convicted with the crime on an appeal, but by then he could not be found. A warrant for his arrest was now out. By the time they had located Sergio, rumor was that he had joined Los Zetas cartel, one of the most notorious gangs in Mexico. He was now under the gang's protection and had another wife and a child. The police would have to ask the gang if they could arrest their own member, but by that time Sergio had worked his way up the ladder. The Escobedo family started to receive serious death threats, but Marisela refused to be silenced. She instead staged protests all over Mexico, the biggest being on the square of the governor's palace of Chihuahua, where just weeks earlier a new conservative governor had just been sworn in, Sacerdote. On the evening of December 16, 2012, a car pulled up to Marisela as she was packing up for the night, along with her brother Ricardo. The assassin chased her across the street and executed her right on the palace's doorsteps, all caught on surveillance cameras. Marisela's murder shocked the nation. In April of 2011, the suspects of the killing, Jose Enrique Jimenez Zavala, was arrested after confessing to her death. However, Ricardo, the only eyewitness, did not recognize Jose as the killer. The family believes it was actually Andy Bezada, Sergio's brother, who had threatened Marisela's life in the past and was handpicked in a photo lineup by Ricardo. Andy was never charged, and Jose admitted that he was not the killer before dying from a stroke in a high-security prison. Sure, like that happened. Despite the injustice, both Ruby and Marisela's case are closed on an official level. In 2019, the Escobedo family, led by Juan, Ruby's brother, who now lives in El Paso, Texas, if I'm correct, according to the documentary, on political asylum, presented the case against Mexico to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Andy Bezada, who now is in prison in Texas for stealing boots, claims he was not in Mexico when Marisela was killed, but rather was working at a restaurant on Mesa Street in El Paso, not getting off of work until 1 a.m. The restaurant I think this is Mesa Street Grill. I'm not sure, but it's the only restaurant I can think that is on Mesa Street that stays open past midnight. I don't know. Andy claims that his brother Sergio killed Marisela, ordering the hit, having someone else kill her from the gang. Marisela became a martyr for the movement for femicides to be punished. Her daughter's killer was known. He admitted to the crime, but was rather acquitted and got off with the crime. She brought femicide to the national forefront and became a symbol for fighting for justice. So, being as it is believed that the Zetas killed Marisela, another gang, I don't know if it was the Juarez cartel or the Sinaloa cartel, they offered to kill Marisela's perpetrator for killing her because they have gang beef. The family denied, of course, but there's a lot more to that story. I think you should watch the documentary to see. That's just scratching the surface of what happened. So the last thing I want to talk about are the pink crosses that represent femicide victims. In 2002, the anti-femicide coalition known as Ni Una Más, or Not One More, installed a large pink cross at Paso del Norte Bridge, the main passageway between Ciudad Juarez and El Paso. Paso. It serves as a testimony to the crimes against the woman and community of Ciudad Juarez and a protest against the ongoing violence and systemic injustice that perpetuates the violence. The pink cross is echoed throughout the city and the surrounding desert, where activists install them in places where women's bodies have been found with their names on it. Adorned with flowers, the victim's name written in black on the crossbar. These crosses remember the lives lost to the hate-filled vial for control between organized crime, government actions, and other economic interests. Further, the crosses are a way of reclaiming the territory marked by the drug cartels, dislodging their signs of death with Christ's signs of solidarity and suffering and external life. The pink crosses gesture to Christ's crucifixion, resurrection, and the aving of sacrifice of significance of these events for the femicide women. The reference to Jesus' crucifixion is obvious in the light of the brutal and unjust nature of these murders. Hundreds of pink crosses displayed throughout Ciudad Juarez are a painful reminder that women are brutally taken from their families to preserve power grab and pursuit of profit in the region. Like Jesus Christ, who suffered under Pontificate, these crosses gesture to the unjust system that stands flat-footed in the face of devastation of an entire society and generation of young women. They signify the community's mourning and longing for release from the violence, identifying the suffering of their sisters and their communal suffering. By painting the cross pink, the anti-femicide activists highlight the hope for resurrection promised by the cross. The pink color reminds them that of the third week of Advent, when the church lights a rose-colored candle to signify our hope in the midst of their waiting. So all that is from what the pink crosses represent. I know it's a lot religion speak and all that, but there are not a lot of individual victim stories you can find on the internet, which are more than like 3 paragraphs long, which is really heartbreaking because at this point all the femicides are lumped together. If any family would make too much noise, they would be silenced by authorities or criminal figures. Every single one of these homicide victims deserve justice, but sadly that may not be the case for them. To add in, these women being killed are minorities who in the American media do not matter because they are not white. As a Latina myself, that's hard to come to terms with. I know personally myself a bunch of people, women to be exact, that live in Juarez but come to school in El Paso. I'm not gonna lie, it terrifies me every time the violence is at a high in Juarez like it's been recently, and also every day for their lives with femicides on the rise. So I know this video was a little different than we normally talk about. Normally we focus on one case, but that is not the case today. This is an epidemic I really wanted to talk about. So yeah. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. I know this one was hard to digest and a lot more mathematical, but it is very important. My sources are linked down below. 2 things I definitely think you should check out is the documentary on Netflix and the podcast on iHeartRadio. It puts a little bit more into perspective. So the picture of the week is this picture of a lot of my dogs. I'm gonna have their names on the screen so you can see who is who, but they're all sleeping. So if you want another hometown horror case, last week I uploaded one on DJ Franco. I'll have it on the end card right now or up here in the eye, and that one is another heartbreaking one that it has yet to find justice. But yeah, love you, mean it, kisses, don't think stupid, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!